The shadows in my mind stretch longer at night, curling around the corners I try to ignore. I've always been good at pretending I'm not lost, but lately the darkness feels more like a presence than a void. It's as if my own thoughts have taken on weight, pressing down harder, whispering secrets I never wanted to hear. Sometimes I wonder if I've been walking through a fog I can't lift, or if I've simply stopped trying to see clearly. I never thought a simple trip to the bookstore would change that. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the sky hangs heavy with gray, and every step echoes on the slick pavement. I had just finished browsing the poetry section, fingers tracing worn covers, when I noticed him. He was leaning against the counter, a tall figure with an air of quiet confidence. His eyes flicked over me like a shadow passing through a doorway, familiar yet distant. He smiled, and I felt an inexplicable pull. It was one of those smiles that feels rehearsed, almost too perfect, like he'd been practicing it for someone he already knew too well. "You look like you're searching for something lost," he said softly, voice smooth but with an undercurrent of something darker. His words sank in, strange and intimate, as if he'd overheard my thoughts. I nodded, instinctively clutching my bag tighter. There was an odd warmth in his gaze, or perhaps it was just the flickering neon light bouncing off the rain-slicked glass. As I turned to leave, he reached out and gently touched my wrist, a gesture that felt both too familiar and unnervingly precise. His fingers lingered, sending a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. "I think you're closer than you realize," he murmured, as locking onto mine like a secret he was dying to tell. His voice had the kind of certainty that made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. I wanted to pull away, to retreat into my silence, but his presence held me there, rooted. The bookstore's fluorescent glow flickered overhead, casting shadows that danced like whispers along the shelves. The scent of old paper and rain mingled in the air, heavy and thick with unspoken promises. I could feel my heartbeat quicken, a strange thrill mixed with unease. I was aware of how easily I'd been pulled into this moment, how the boundary between stranger and familiarity blurred with each passing second. He looked at me then, with a gaze that lingered just a moment too long, as if he were trying to see past my skin into something deeper. "We'll meet again," he said, almost in a whisper, before turning away into the rain. I stood there, clutching my bag, feeling the weight of his words settle like a stone in my stomach. Something about that encounter felt like a whisper in a dream I didn't want to wake from. At the time, I convinced myself it was just coincidence, an odd, fleeting connection in an ordinary day. But now I wonder if I ever truly left that moment behind, or if it's been waiting silently, lurking just beyond the edge of my perception, ready to remind me of what I don't want to face. He remembered small things I said that I didn't even realize I shared, how I liked the way rain sounds against the window, or how I always pause before answering certain questions. Later, he would bring them up, as if he had memorized every detail of my mind, making me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced before. It was like a secret language only we understood, and I clung to it, craving the feeling of being understood completely. When he shared a story about himself, the quiet struggle of feeling invisible, the loneliness behind his words, I found myself leaning closer, sensing that we were both lost in a kind of silent vulnerability. His honesty made me believe that maybe we'd found a rare connection, something destiny had quietly stitched together. He praised me in ways that felt oddly possessive. "You see the world differently," he'd whisper, voice low. "No one else sees it like you do." It sounded like a compliment, but there was an edge, a weight to the words, as if he believed I belonged to that unique perspective, the way a rare gem is owned rather than admired. I started to think that maybe I was special because of him, that my worth was intertwined with this fragile, intense bond we shared. Then he began to do small, controlling things masked as love. One evening he looked into my eyes and softly said, "Promise me you'll always tell me everything." I nodded, feeling the heaviness of his gaze. It felt like safety, an unspoken promise that I wouldn't hide anything. But beneath that I sensed a quiet demand, a need to possess my truth. When I mentioned a message from someone else, he tilted his head, voice gentle but firm. "Do they really know you like I do?" he asked, almost as if testing my loyalty. I told myself it was devotion, that he only wanted to protect what was ours, but I felt a strange flutter of unease. He brought me a flower, an intricate, delicate bloom that matched the ink of a small tattoo I'd never shared with anyone. The gesture was precise, almost ceremonial, as if he'd studied my gestures and habits, mirroring them unconsciously. Sitting close in silence, I felt exposed, like the space between us was an invisible barrier I couldn't cross. His hand brushed my wrist, fingers lingering just enough to send a shiver down my spine. It was subtle, almost tender, but I sensed the intimacy was deeper, layers I hadn't fully understood yet. Eager for his approval, I started to answer faster, to cancel plans just to be with him. My thoughts constantly circled around him, trying to anticipate what he needed, what would make him happy. I told myself I was simply devoted. This was love, wasn't it? Yet, a small voice inside whispered warnings I refused to listen to. I was rearranging my life around a fragile, flickering hope that I mattered. I felt my sense of self slipping, slowly dissolving into the space he created around me. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if this was truly love or something darker, an invisible tether pulling me closer, tightening with each passing day. I told myself I was safe, that he cared. But deep down, I knew that beneath the surface of tenderness, something else lurked, something I hadn't yet dared to name. If obsession felt like protection, then maybe I'd never really been safe at all. And as I sat there, tangled in this quiet, dangerous intimacy, I couldn't help but wonder at what cost was this closeness coming. It was as if a faint static had begun to weave into the silence of my days, an invisible interference I couldn't quite shake. Small things, tiny shifts in routine, like a grain of sand slipping into the gears of my life. I started noticing his presence more than I wanted to admit, not in overt ways, but in the way he subtly infiltrated everything I did. An unexpected call, a message that said, "Just in the neighborhood," as if that explained a visit that I hadn't expected or invited. His voice notes would arrive at odd hours, always checking what I was doing, who I was with, as if my movements were a puzzle he needed to solve. He began suggesting I spend less time with my friends and family. "They stress you out," he'd say softly, almost like a gentle reminder, but I felt the weight of it pressing into my chest. Slowly, my schedule shifted to align with his ideas, meals at specific times, rest periods when he deemed appropriate, as if my body was a puppet responding to his strings. I caught myself hesitating before making plans, second-guessing my own instincts, as if my choices belonged to him now, woven into his narrative. Sometimes I'd catch myself recalling a conversation, only to realize he'd already denied I'd ever said it. "I never said that, babe," he'd whisper with a quiet certainty, "you're misremembering again." It was confusing. His words made me doubt my memories, distort my sense of reality. I'd find myself questioning my own mind, my clarity dissolving like fog into the early morning. My thoughts felt like a room with peeling wallpaper, faded images I could no longer trust, edges curling away into shadow. My days blurred into an indistinct canvas, as if someone had gently turned down the volume on my life, quieting the colors and sounds I once recognized. I felt like wallpaper peeling in a room no one cared to look at anymore, fragile and fading beneath the weight of his quiet control. I was becoming smaller, less visible, less myself, and I didn't seem to notice until I caught glimpses of my reflection, a stranger's eye staring back, uncertain and distant. I started hiding parts of myself, nervous that voicing my true feelings might upset him. I canceled plans without explanation, laughed when I wanted to cry, rehearsed responses to keep the peace. It was a silent surrender, a slow erosion of my own voice. The more I tried to hold on to what was left of myself, the more I felt like I was slipping through cracks I couldn't see. Inside, a conflicted voice whispered, "He's just scared to lose me." But I wondered, why did it feel like I was the one disappearing? Why did this love feel so fragile it might shatter at any moment? Every time I stayed silent, I wondered if I was choosing peace or surrender. And as I sank deeper into this quiet maze, a chilling thought took hold. Maybe this was love, but why did I feel so alone inside it? I found myself erasing little pieces of who I was almost without thinking. It started with the small things, deleting social media apps he didn't approve of, hiding photos that showed my genuine smile, or wearing the outfits he said made me look too loud. At first, it felt like I was doing it for peace, for simplicity, for avoiding the endless quiet disappointment in his eyes. But deep down, I knew I was losing something more, something fragile and essential that I couldn't quite name. Every time I closed a door for him, I left part of myself behind. I told myself I was choosing harmony, but I wondered if I was just shrinking into a quieter version of myself. When I skipped my own birthday celebration because he didn't feel like going, I felt a pang of guilt, like I was betraying my own joy. I told myself it was okay, better to be safe, better to avoid his subtle criticisms. Still, I saw the empty space where my laughter used to be, and I wondered if I'd ever find my way back. I avoided my reflection, sidestepping the mirror in the hallway, afraid of what I might see. The mirror had become a symbol of everything I was quietly abandoning: my confidence, my identity, my voice. I kept a painting hidden in a drawer, a swirl of colors that once made me feel alive, but now I couldn't even remember why I'd kept it. It was as if I was creating a secret vault of my past self, locked away to keep him from noticing how much I'd changed. He never raised his voice, but he made sure I felt the weight of my own perceived failures. Sometimes he'd softly say, "You used to be more loving," or hint that I wasn't paying enough attention. His words seeped into my mind, twisting around my thoughts like vines. I started to believe that obedience was affection, that silencing my own needs was how I showed I cared. When I would quietly agree or suppress my feelings, he'd praise me, calling me so understanding, so patient. I thought I was earning his approval, but I was only dimming the parts of me that mattered. I smiled for him, but I don't think it ever reached my eyes anymore. My own reflection looked unfamiliar, like a stranger I was trying to hide from. I was becoming the echo of someone he approved of, a shadow that flickered faintly in the corners of my mind. Sometimes I wondered if I was still me or just the version he needed me to be. Each small act of surrender left me feeling more hollow, more invisible. I was slowly dissolving into a quiet, trembling version of myself, one that no longer demanded to be seen. I thought I was choosing peace, but maybe I was just choosing to disappear. I could feel the cracks forming beneath my skin, the silent fractures that whispered I was losing myself, piece by fragile piece. And yet, I couldn't find the strength to stop. Not yet. I woke up and the room felt wrong, as if I'd slipped into a dream I couldn't wake from. The walls seemed to ripple, shifting like liquid beneath a thin layer of glass. I reached out to touch the surface, but my hand passed through. My reflection was gone, replaced by a blank mirror that showed nothing but shadows. I blinked, trying to anchor myself, but the image behind my eyes was a blur, fragmented and distant. It was as if I was staring at a ghost version of myself, one I no longer recognized. Sometimes I'd catch myself hesitating before I answered, my voice uncertain, as if I were speaking someone else's words. I'd forget if I'd eaten, what day it was, or why I even woke up. My memories felt like shards of broken glass, sharp, jagged, impossible to piece together. I'd dream of escape, of running into the dark, but I'd wake paralyzed, my limbs heavy and unresponsive, as if invisible hands kept me anchored inside this fractured mind. He had begun to reshape my inner world with disturbing precision. Little by little, he erased what I thought I knew, rewriting my history like a cruel author. "That never happened," he'd say softly when I tried to bring up the past. "You're being dramatic," he'd add, dismissing my feelings as if they were fabrications. He'd delete contacts from my phone, claiming it was for my own good, though I never asked for his opinion. When I hesitated to make decisions, he'd speak for me, choosing what I should do, what I should remember. He replaced my journal with a new one, its pages blank but for a single sentence, his handwriting, neat and cold, "Your memories belong to me now." My playlist vanished overnight, replaced by a song he made, a melody that echoed in my mind like a haunting echo of my own voice. I'd listen, trying to hold on to who I was, but the notes felt foreign, alien. Inside, I was torn apart. One part of me still clung to love, to the illusion of intimacy we shared. I believed his words, even when they hurt. I convinced myself that maybe he only wanted to protect me, that his control was a form of care. But another part, the quiet, trembling voice inside, screamed for freedom. It whispered that I was losing myself, that I was no longer a person but a shadow, a reflection in someone else's mirror. Sometimes I felt like I was being rewritten in his handwriting, each stroke erasing my own thoughts, replacing them with his truths. It was a slow erosion, a silent surrender that I barely recognized as happening. I'd catch glimpses of her, the girl I used to be, in fleeting moments, but she was fading, slipping through cracks I didn't know existed. And now I question if I'm still in there somewhere. Maybe I haven't vanished yet, but I can no longer remember the girl I once was. My voice sounds distant, even inside my own mind, as if I'm speaking from behind a thick glass wall. I'm not sure who I am anymore, or if I ever was. I only know that somewhere inside, beneath the fragments, there's a faint, fragile hope that I might still find her, if I can remember how to look. My reflection no longer moved in sync with me. It felt like I was watching a stranger's face, one that mirrored my own, yet seemed to have a life of its own. Sometimes I would catch glimpses of my own eyes darting away when I looked directly at them, as if my reflection refused to recognize me. I'd stare at the glass, waiting for it to blink, to smile, to give me some sign that I was still real. But all I saw was a distorted version of myself, a hollow echo that whispered I was losing grip, slipping into something darker I couldn't name. The handwriting on the pages I kept my handwriting began to look strange. Words I'd written in my own shaky scrawl now appeared alien, like someone else's notes left behind. I'd read a sentence, then have no idea how it got there, or why it felt so foreign. My mind was unraveling, fragmenting into pieces I couldn't reassemble. I'd forget how long I'd been in the room, how many hours had passed, whether I'd eaten or slept. The walls around me seemed to breathe, subtly shifting as if the space itself was conspiring to erase my sense of time and place. Sometimes I would hear his voice soft, insidious, calling my name when no one was there. It echoed in my mind, louder than my own thoughts, drowning out my voice and my memories. I'd catch myself responding, answering questions I hadn't been asked, as if I was trapped in a conversation I couldn't control. I started questioning whether the thoughts in my head were truly mine, or if he had somehow planted them there, rewriting my internal script. Memories that once seemed vivid now felt flimsy, like photographs left in the rain, their edges blurred and warped. I couldn't trust what I remembered anymore. Everywhere I looked, the world was subtly altering. Photos I'd once treasured vanished from their frames, replaced by blank spaces that felt like empty eyes staring back at me. Clothes I knew I owned turned into unfamiliar fabrics and colors, as if someone had replaced my wardrobe overnight. My playlist switched without my input, songs I didn't recognize, melodies that felt wrong, as if someone else was choosing the soundtrack of my life. The sense of control I once had was slipping away, replaced by a creeping feeling that I was being reshaped in invisible hands. Inside my mind, his voice echoed louder than before, an internal monologue I couldn't turn off. I'd hear him, whispering secrets I wasn't supposed to hear, planting ideas that I couldn't distinguish from my own thoughts. I wondered if my memories were real, or if they'd been altered, stitched together with lies he had woven into my psyche. Sometimes I'd flash back to moments I never lived, images that felt too perfect, too manipulated, like scenes from a film I was unwittingly starring in. I was losing myself, piece by piece, and I knew it. Yet, amid the chaos, I clung to faint fragments of resistance. I found a photograph tucked away, an old childhood picture I thought I'd destroyed, its image still clear and familiar. I discovered a single note in my handwriting, a small message scrawled in defiance. And sometimes I'd remember a childhood memory that didn't quite fit the narrative he was constructing for me, a flash of innocence I refused to let go of. Maybe I was still in there somewhere. Beneath the layers of manipulation and silence, I felt a flicker of something real, hope, or defiance, buried deep. I knew I'd need to remember who I was before I forgot entirely. There was a whisper beneath the silence, a faint voice that I prayed was mine, and I clung to it, desperate to hold on. Because if I lost that, I wondered if I'd ever find myself again. A sudden, overwhelming wave crashed over me, as if my mind had been a fragile glass vessel, and someone had shattered it with a single blow. The silence that followed was deafening. It felt like my brain split open, shards of reality scattering in every direction, leaving me trembling on the edge of something I couldn't quite grasp. My breath caught, and I couldn't tell if I was gasping for air or screaming inside my head. The room spun, colors bleeding into each other, and I was paralyzed, trapped between what I knew and what I could no longer trust. Then I saw it, something small and familiar but utterly wrong. A photograph slipped from my trembling fingers, fluttering to the floor. It was a childhood picture, or so I thought. But the face had changed. My own face altered, softer somehow, with eyes that looked like they belonged to someone else. I stared at it, feeling my throat tighten, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. This wasn't just a mistake or a trick of the light, it was deliberate. Something had rewritten my history, erased parts of who I was. My mind raced, trying to piece together what I'd seen before. Had I been sleeping? Was I losing my grip on reality? Or had he finally broken through the last defense I had, rewriting everything I thought I knew? My hands trembled as I remembered the voice, soft, coaxing, yet edged with an icy threat, that whispered my name last night, the one I only ever used for myself. I knew it was him. I knew he was inside my head, controlling the very words I thought were mine. I sank to my knees, clutching my head as if I could hold myself together. Tears spilled over, hot and relentless, streaming down my cheeks. I screamed, silent, muffled by the weight of my own despair, while my mind fractured into 1,000 pieces. I felt like I was watching myself from outside, a ghost trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Nothing made sense anymore. The walls around me felt like they were breathing, the shadows stretching and whispering secrets I couldn't hear but somehow understood. A voice inside whispered that I had already lost myself, that the girl I thought I was had slipped away somewhere in the dark. The realization hit like a punch to the stomach. What if I wasn't just losing myself? What if I had already vanished, replaced by someone I no longer recognized? Fear and surrender tangled together, and I wondered if I could survive this collapse or if I was destined to drown in it. I clenched my fists, fighting the chaos, but the thought of running or hiding or even hurting myself flickered through my mind. I was at the edge, teetering on the brink of something terrible, yet I didn't move. I only whispered my own name, over and over, desperate to remember if it still belonged to me. The sound felt foreign, like a stranger's voice, and I clung to that fragment, my last link to who I was. Something inside me cracked, an invisible fracture that no longer ached but shimmered with quiet finality. For the first time, I didn't flinch when it shattered. I just sat there trembling, knowing that the illusion had already begun to crumble, and that the true breaking point was imminent. I was standing at the edge of the abyss, and I didn't know if I would fall or somehow find the strength to stay. But in this moment, all I could do was whisper my name and pray that it was still mine to keep. I was making tea, the warm steam curling up in lazy tendrils, when my phone buzzed on the counter. A message. No name, just a single line, "Are you okay?" The words hit like a cold splash. I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling. Who was still watching me? My heart pounded, but I told myself it was just a prank until I looked closer and saw that the message was sent from a number I didn't recognize. My breath caught. I had never given anyone that number. Then, a sudden flash, a photo appeared on my screen. It was me in my living room, but I didn't remember taking it. I didn't remember ever standing there in that exact spot. The image was sharp, too sharp, and for a moment I thought I was losing my mind. I blinked. The image was gone. But the feeling lingered. Something was wrong, something I couldn't quite grasp. My eyes darted around the room. It looked normal, but nothing felt right. The bookshelf, the mirror, the faint hum of the refrigerator, each detail seemed alien. Rooms I'd known all my life now looked unfamiliar, like they had been rearranged, reconfigured in a dream I couldn't wake from. Memories flickered, moments I swore I remembered, now distorted or staged. My hands moved involuntarily, brushing my hair with a rhythm that wasn't mine. I caught myself in the mirror, my reflection flickering as if struggling to stay present, to stay real. A sudden sensation of wrongness prickled my skin. I reached into my closet, pulling out a dress I didn't recognize. It hung there, hanging too perfectly, waiting for me to wear it, though I had no memory of buying it. My own handwriting stared back at me from a sticky note left on the mirror, altered, slanted, wrong. I had written, but the words felt foreign, desperate attempts to cling to some semblance of normalcy. The silence pressed down, thick and oppressive. Then came a whisper, faint but insidious, echoing in my mind. I hadn't made that call. I hadn't written that note. Someone had done it for me, someone who knew my every habit, my every secret, as if I'd been living in a carefully constructed illusion all along. And then I saw it, an old photograph, faded and worn. My childhood face stared back, but something was off. My eyes looked hollow, distant, almost vacant. My smile was too fixed, too perfect. It was as if my past had been rewritten, edited, erased, and replaced with a version I didn't recognize. I clutched it tightly, trembling, knowing deep down that I was no longer the person I thought I was. A cold dread settled over me. This wasn't just manipulation or obsession. It was control. Every "I love you," every word of affection had been a lock clicking shut, sealing me in a cage I'd never seen until now. He hadn't fallen in love with me. He had constructed me, piece by piece, memory by memory, until I was nothing more than a reflection he could manipulate at will. I realized painfully that I had been living inside a story he wrote with my skin as the pages. And I was only just beginning to see the cracks. The illusion was crumbling, and I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't undo. I didn't trust myself anymore, not the mirror, not my memories, not my own voice. But beneath the flood of terror, a fragile decision formed. I had to break free. I had to escape this fabricated nightmare before there was nothing left of who I truly was. I waited until I was sure he was asleep, heart pounding like it wanted to escape my chest. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, knowing every second I hesitated was a second I might be caught. I had only a few seconds of clarity, just enough to make a move, to try to reclaim some shred of myself. I packed only what I remembered, my coat, a few coins, the vague hope that stepping outside might somehow free me from this suffocating grip. Standing in front of the mirror, I whispered my name aloud, just to hear it again, to remind myself I was still me. It felt fragile, like shattering glass. My stomach twisted into knots, my breathing ragged. The room seemed to press down harder, every shadow a potential trap. What if he's already in my head? The thought clung to me like a second skin. Even the silence felt like a trap, waiting to swallow me whole. I took a shaky step toward the door, fingers fumbling on the handle. Every movement felt watched, every creak of the floorboards a signal that I was breaking some unspoken rule. My body felt distant, like I'd become a ghost trying to escape my own prison. I could almost hear his voice whispering, warning me to stay, reminding me that I belonged to him now. Then I saw it, the glint of the camera lens peering from the corner, a tiny, unblinking eye. My stomach sank. Had he installed it again? Was I already being watched? Panic surged through me, sharp and raw. I fumbled with the doorknob, voice caught in my throat as I tried to force it open. Almost there, almost free. But then the door suddenly jerked, as if pushed from the other side. My heart froze solid. I was caught in the act, exposed in a way I couldn't undo. In that frantic moment, I tore at the necklace he'd given me, feeling it snap in half as I yanked it from my neck. The chain shattered, the pendant falling to the floor with a dull clink. It was more than jewelry, an emblem of his control, now broken. I grabbed a torn page from my journal, the one where I tried to write my real name, the one he'd never allowed me to keep. I tore it out, crumpling it in my fists, desperate to erase that part of my past, that piece of myself he'd tried to erase. But even as I tore through the symbols of my supposed freedom, I knew I wasn't truly free yet. I was exposed, vulnerable, standing on the edge of something darker. I had cracked the glass, shattered the illusion, but I could still see him staring through the fractured shards. His presence lingered, silent but omnipresent. I could feel him watching, waiting, knowing exactly how close I was to breaking completely. And I knew deep down the final confrontation was coming. I wasn't safe. Not yet. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch and twist, whispering promises of what was still to come. I had taken a step toward escape, but the real battle, the one that would finally decide if I could reclaim myself, was just ahead. And when he knew I was trying, I wondered if I'd be ready to face him, or if I'd only be exposing myself to the darkness I'd fought so hard to escape. I didn't run. Not yet. I just stood there, trembling, heart pounding like a trapped animal. The room was silent except for my ragged breathing, but I could feel him behind me, watching, waiting. Every instinct screamed for me to escape, to run far away from the shadows that had haunted me for so long. Yet, my legs felt rooted, as if the weight of everything, the lies, the manipulation, the broken pieces of my mind, had turned me into stone. I turned slowly, as darting across the dim room, searching for a sign of him. But all I saw was the faint glimmer of the broken necklace I'd hidden in my pocket, a symbol of my shattered connection to him. The moment I looked up, our eyes met. Mine wide with icy resolve, his dark and cold, unrepentant. The silence stretched so thick it pressed against my chest, suffocating but somehow freeing. For the first time in what felt like forever, I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was afraid of losing myself completely. He stepped forward, a slow, deliberate motion, and I saw the flicker of something in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or flicker of anger. I didn't care. My voice, shaky but steady, broke the silence. It's over. The word felt strange, foreign, as if I had spoken it from a distance. I held up the torn page from my journal, an act of defiance, a fragment of my truth I refused to let him erase. His face twisted in something between rage and confusion, but I didn't wait for an explanation. I turned away, clutching the piece of paper, and made my way to the door. I could hear his footsteps behind me, heavy and slow, like a predator knowing the hunt was over. I reached for the doorknob, my fingers trembling, but I pushed through the fear and stepped into the unknown. As I crossed the threshold, I felt the weight of his presence still lurking in the shadows. I looked back once, seeing the faint outline of the room, the place where my memories had been rewritten, where his voice had echoed in my mind like a ghost. I whispered my own name, aloud and clear, feeling a strange sense of power. For the first time, I claimed it as mine, separate from his manipulations. Outside, the air was colder, sharper, but somehow purer. I felt the jagged edges of the broken necklace digging into my palm, a reminder that I had severed the ties that bound me. I didn't know what awaited beyond that door of freedom, or further darkness, but I knew I was no longer his prisoner. I had taken back what was mine piece by piece. Even now, as I sit here, my hands still trembling, I hear his voice lingering in my mind, an echo I can't quite silence. But I also hear my own, louder and clearer. I survived him. I reclaimed my story. And maybe, just maybe, I can start healing from the wreckage he left behind. I walked away with nothing, and somehow that was everything.